Okay, well, I've talked about them so much, I'm not quite sure what to say. I still consider myself an amateur photographer, but coming to 3rd Street has helped enhance my skills, as well as being a part of a few critique groups and other photographers, and just having the opportunity to learn more and get exposed to other artists, which has been absolutely great. So I've probably been photographing most of my life. My father was an amateur photographer, and so of course I have to sort of emulate my father, but obviously he did film. This was long before digital. He was darkroom, and I always wanted to do photography, but was too busy with my work. So as soon as I retired, great, I could start doing my thing. And so this exhibit is sort of a culmination of just a few pieces of my work called Looking Without Seeing. And essentially that means that because I value my eyesight so much, and without cataract surgery, I was essentially so nearsighted that sight is something wonderful. So looking without seeing essentially means I look to see the things that people don't normally look at or don't normally identify as something to look at. And as a matter of fact, let's see, yes, the photo here, which is on my card, was out a window downtown at 12th and Locust. And I showed someone the raw picture, and they said, of the, I don't know what to call them, streetwalker, that's in the picture. And she said, oh yes, when you live down here, you don't see them anymore, they're just there. But I saw it, but I also saw the mural behind them. And it was and this is what that picture is called, juxtaposition, that I just thought it was ironic that you have these two very different figures. So these are just a combination of photographs from Philadelphia and Sicily. How do you put those together? I just put them together. But it's sort of the same, that just things that caught my eye and things I wanted to come back to. And this is part of what I said in my artist statements, that my photography gives me the opportunity to go back and really look at what caught my eye. And sometimes I actually see more. It's like, wow, I didn't see that before. Oh, that's so cool. And when I did the relaxing in red, I saw the red chairs, but I didn't notice that the grates were red too. And it's like, oh, that's really cool.
Is that the natural color of the photograph? I mean, did you change the color of what you saw?
The color of the seats is a bit intensified.
But otherwise?
Otherwise, yes, because it was spring, the vines had not started growing yet. So it was sort of gray and red.
Really?
I am trying very hard to get more people in my photography. I tend to like lines and lots of lines, architectural. You can actually see that in my photography.
Does the red hold some significance to you? Because it seems that you are attracted to that color.
Despite the fact that I love black and white, I love color. So if there's something that really, really shouts, and red is one of those things in photographs that, from what I've learned, is difficult to sort of do in photography, that it is a component that just stands out. Now, with this picture, that was not what stood out to me, but after doing it again, and after curating, I noticed that, we have red, as you said, it's red, red, red. So, but these sort of singular color that stands out is just something that attracts me.
Are you consciously restricting yourself to black and white to explore that? Or do you have this whole other set that you just didn't happen to be in this show?
Exactly. Yes. I think about the picture that I took on a train that Dove was kind enough to take another picture of, and it was just a mass of colorful graffiti that the Chestnut Hill West Line going downtown. And I think it's wonderful because it's just a smash of colors. But the black and white is nostalgic to me because my father took black and white. And I like the crispness, I like the contrast, and it does very well with architectural photography, which I'm totally in love with. But yes, this is a small example of what I love to take photographs of. Yes?
Have you found a particular time of day is your favorite for taking photographs, or?
Well, when I'm up. Not really. It's when the moment catches me. And I particularly, the orange hour, it was during the golden hour, which is the time that the light is just wonderful. But the light was wonderful, but the orange was as well. And that was just, happened to be in the sushi restaurant down the street, and click, click, oh, wow. So, yes. Yes.
How many of these are with which camera? Well, some of these are iPhone. Some of them are.
You're going to tell on me? You're going to tell on me? This is an iPhone. This is actually Allen's Lane Station, not Allen's Lane. I think the one after it. Highland Station.
Or
Highland. This was an iPhone because that's what I have with me, and this one's an iPhone. I wanted also to say that my father was not just an amateur photographer, but he was an engineer. So he passed to me techie. I am a true techie. I love Photoshop, so it gives me the opportunity to do things to photographs, not to make pixies and twilights and, castles and such, but to turn a photograph into what I'm seeing. I'm a very detail-oriented person, and you start to make these detailed decisions as to what should be there, what shouldn't be there, what is part, what enhances, what takes away. I just wanted to add that I have a haiku that is in the window that essentially was sort of making an analogy to not seeing. And essentially it's a haiku, and this is printed on a braille sheet. And the haiku essentially implies that calloused fingers cannot read. So the blind, whose fingers are callous, cannot read the braille. So they loosely looking without seeing. So I thought that was really deep. but thank you. If there are no more questions. Street.
The next show we have on today, and it's a really cool show, I have to say, with all that gold leaf. Nicole, you're on.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming out today and all the weather. So if you notice in my work, I do a lot of mixed media. I do a lot of layering. I do a lot of playing around with what I was horrible at in school, science and chemistry, but now apparently it's my thing. So you'll see that there's a lot of brown in my work, and I'm just going to start there rather than the topic. I use a lot of rust printing in my work. And so rust printing, I'm going to start off with that because that's always like the question afterwards. So when I do rust printing, I'm making a contact print with a piece of paper. So my paper is usually like high quality printmaking paper, and depending on the different papers you use, you have different pHs that react with rust and what you put on it, which is vinegar. Or any sort of anything with a tannin in it, something that's really acidic. So I'll lay a piece of paper down. I'll wet that paper because rust comes from water and oxygen while integrating. I'll put down vinegar or red wine or sometimes include salts. You can pretty much experiment with anything that is acidic. Some things work, some things don't. You can use any type of tea. In terms of vinegars, you can go with grape vinegar, like the kind you're drinking. You can go with, which works really well. You can go with apple cider vinegar. You can go with your standard vinegar. I use concentrated vinegar a lot. That's for cooking. There's household cleaner vinegar. That's really probably something you shouldn't breathe in. There's all sorts of things. So you wet your paper, you have your vinegar or your sometimes wine on top of it. Put all these things down. You place pieces of rust on top of it, or you place your paper on top of rust. Rust can come in shapes. You can find it in antique stores. You can find it on the street. You can find it at a train station. You can buy it on eBay in shapes. So there's all sorts of places for it. You can just get sheets of it. Things you can rust are anything with the alloy of, well, not the alloy, with iron in it, and the alloys usually come in steel. Steel that is not surfaced is easier to rust. Like, you don't want to have to break any barriers to rust it. Sometimes zinc will work. So anything that actually has iron in it, and I'll explain why that goes with my theme later. So I usually start out with some sort of form that I create with the rust bits, and then I suffocate it with plastic. That keeps it all in and lets it bleed onto the paper, and that's what a contact print is. And then I, reveal it, and then sometimes I'll put more layers on and redo the process over and over. So most of these have started out that way. Sometimes what I'll do later on is collage bits and pieces together of that rusting, and you'll see it in some of them. And some are done on more like a mulberry paper, and some are done on heavyweight printmaking paper like Reeves or Hahnemuhle copper plate. Those are some of my favorites. And they come to me because when I was in grad school, I was really focused a lot on etching. And so Hahnemuhle copper plate was one of my favorite pieces of paper. And these actually are etchings underneath. So that's kind of where I started playing around with paper and stuff and figuring out what I like and what I didn't like. So that's the base of it. Now, my theme is based on kind of alchemy. Like I said, I wasn't really great in chemistry or science. It wasn't my thing, neither was math. But everything I do lately has to do with mixing chemicals, from candle making to playing around with essential oils to rust printing to etching. So I'm kind of in it all over the place. I'm also doing jewelry making now. So I'm playing with metals. And in alchemy, there are some 7 special metals that they really focus on. The ancient alchemists, 3 of them I'm only going to talk about, really liked gold, they really liked silver, and they liked iron. So iron, going back to the rust, really it was supposed to be representative of a masculine energy, but it's also something that kind of degrades, decomposes images, or not images, decomposes the metal. And so it has those kind of properties. So with decomposition comes regeneration and the cycle of life, that kind of thing. Gold, they were always trying to turn a lesser metal into a better metal. But it was also representative of taking your base self, your lower self, and turning it into your higher self. So through a process of basically tearing everything down, getting to the base, disintegrating everything, pulling your parts out, and then going through the process of rebuilding. You're becoming a better person, and you're going to reach your divine higher plane. So a lot of these are based on that, and so gold is that highest plane. So you'll see a lot of gold in my images, and then you'll also see, well, gold also pertains to masculine. Sun is usually part of masculine. Sun and gold go together to, you know, show off that spirit. And so down at the end here, I have something called logos and eros. The gold, though, is on the female side, and the silver, which is related to the moon, shows like the ebbs and flows of life and all the craziness and chaos that goes with it, but it represents female. And so, I'll explain why they're opposite, but so with the female properties of the lunar and the silver, you're really thinking about reflection, intuition, mothering, that kind of thing. Whereas the masculine gold, the energies involved with it are protection and order. We have, with silver, chaos, and out of chaos comes creation. You've got that mothering, you've also got that internal intuition. So they're opposite, because the logos and eros, as an idea, you have to have a little of both to be balanced. And what alchemists are seeking are perfection, which is why they were seeking gold. That idea that we need to be balanced, to be perfect, to go to our highest self and divine. And that's why I've used these. So these all talk about different stages in the alchemist's kind of cookbook. So I came up with this because what I've been focusing on is just basically my process to become a better person and to kind of seek God and seek what's beyond. Seeing without looking, or however Claire put it, is kind of the thing, but going past what we normally would see and feel and do that. And I did that because my mother died in 2020 of COVID. And since then, I've just been sort of kind of figuring out what the heck I believe. We have a lot of signs that come to us that make me feel like she's with us. And just sort of understanding human nature and why we're here, existence, and all of that. So that's why I'm delving into this topic. But then, of course, I like chemistry. So alchemy is pre-chemistry. It's before. They've developed a lot of wonderful things through it, things that helped heal us. They know a lot of properties to each metal and to each thing they use. And it was an amazing science, pre-science, but also dealt with the higher self and spirituality, which when we have science in our society today, we often don't include spirituality. And I believe that without thinking about that, you're only getting a part of the picture instead of the full picture. And I know everybody questions, you know, why we're here, what's it all about, and what's going on. So I think we'll never get that until those two come together. Might be able to talk about a few little elements in some of them, like I have something called Negredo, Albedo, and Rubedo. And they stand for different things in alchemy. You can think of it as chemistry, but you can also think about it as a transformation in yourself. So Negredo is known as the blackening. It's where everything is decayed or decomposed, or they call it putrefaction. So you'll see some bones in there, one of my favorite things. And you'll see, like I put a lot more black and it's a darker image. When you come to albedo, you start to get that light coming through. You've hit your rock bottom, or you start to, in chemistry, clean it up a bit. And even this image itself has salt in it. Salt is used for purifying. So when I was doing the rust print, there was salt put in. And it's a whiter, so that glow is coming through the darkness. But you'll also see hints of gold because it's starting to come through. So we're starting to dig in, fall apart, dig in, bring ourselves back up, and we go to rubedo, which is where you're kind of given this force, this flush red. It's called the reddening. And you're lifted and taken to your higher self. So that's why you see an angel, and you see the color red in there. It's just really interesting about the transformations that we go through and how it can also relate to chemistry. And since I was sort of delving into the spiritual aspect of it, finding out that it really relates to all the chemical stuff that I'm doing, it kind of pulls it together. So it's a study that I'm going to keep doing in art, and I'm also an art history teacher. So in art history, and also just as in studying about spirituality and chemistry. I like both. So I also represent, lastly, I'll just talk about the elements. So you'll see there's earth, air, wind, fire represented in all of it. And then those were thought to be what everything's made of, but all of those things have to be in balance, and each one has different properties that would come together to help balance things energetically. But then we have quinta essentia, which is basically the aether. It's kind of like that underlying cosmic sound that just sort of booms everything to existence or brings it all back to the divine. So that's represented here. But I did find triangles, and I thought earth, air, wind, fire. So I sort of repurposed in some of my artwork here. That's it. Any questions?
Yeah, particularly your larger pieces, they look like there's many, many layers. So, okay, they maybe started with rust, but like that one, sort of like how many layers were, you know, overlaid?
So this essentially, this one we're talking about, right? So what I did here was the rust. The photographic part is a frontoplate lithography. So that would be a layer. There's a couple of pieces collaged in there. And there's another layer of leaf. I use a lot of leafing. This is pink variegated leafing, and it's got like a copper thing to it. So there's a layer of that. So really it's kind of like a glued collage, but I'll throw back rust in it. I'll take bits and pieces to blend, because one of the things we're talking about, like the mysteries of life, one of the things about art is that it's really cool when it's mysterious and people don't really know how it's made. So I like to blend, so it's like, you know, here's not just a piece of paper stuck on top. So I use my paper, like I'll use a mulberry to kind of blend in with a heavier weight paper, or, you know, use a certain color, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so there's a lot of collaging on top of that, as opposed to like doing a layered print process. Teaching art history and doing this kind of stuff, and then thinking about how magic fits into it, and the old alchemists, is every day we become more open to something that's not your standard Judeo-Christian timeline, straightforward. we find new things that teach us something new about the world, and with our technology, we're finding so much we didn't know, and we're being forced to change our ideas. So art history is really becoming more open and growing in its ideas, as long as you allow that to come in from away from the textbook, because there's plenty we're learning about this kind of stuff.
Like, could you interpret this? Could you do that one? That one seems to tell more of a story to me than a lot.
Yeah, so if you come up to closely, you can read some of the snippets. They do talk about their book of magic. It's an old book that was kind of torn apart, and there are different snippets in here. Let's see if I can read one. There's like the devil, there's good and bad. So there's things about kind of becoming better or digging into your dark side too. So this piece actually, for me, represents sort of digging into your shadow self, the bad things that are there, your negative thoughts, your weird feelings, because when we have this space that's talking about magic and good and bad and that kind of thing, but it's torn apart. And then the hands are in struggle, like they're not like rested, they're not peaceful. So it's kind of talking about that struggle and pulling apart, but it's also has a net that's kind of tying it together. So obviously, like once we're torn apart, we have to come back together.
There's the lines of the white.
Yeah, the white lines, and then there's some bands in rust in the back too that are all kind of interweaving. So not only do you have the ripping and the tension of the hands, but you also have the light and dark in the piece. So it tells us that we have both sides, light and dark, but this talks about working through the darkness. Okay, thank you very much for coming, guys.